White House and with Netanyahu there in Washington. We're joined here in New York by the former IDF spokesperson, retired Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. He's now a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
What do you make of, I think there's an American perspective on things, there's an Israeli perspective on things. President Biden was in the Oval Office last night kind of talking about legacy. I know he wants Middle East peace, obviously would be part of his legacy if he gets a deal. What about the Israeli perspective on things? Is Netanyahu willing to cut a deal, do you think?
I think he is, but I think that the devil is in the details here. And unfortunately, I don't think that a presidential legacy can be peace in the Middle East in the current half year, or perhaps even longer. But we might get a ceasefire deal. We might get the start of a day after in Gaza, which will bring hope to Israelis, hope and security to Israelis, hope and security and dignity to Palestinians, and perhaps something that is different from what we've had in Gaza for the last 17 years under Hamas rule.
Do you think, and I know there's no exact science to this, but if I said to you, would you give better than 50% odds of a ceasefire before the end of the year, what would you say? Because Netanyahu was very aggressive, I thought, yesterday in Congress. What would you say about that?
I'd say that there's a good chance of that because there is sincere willingness in Israel. There's a lot of pressure from the side of the families.
Yes.
Very understandable pressure, who want to see their loved ones home. And the success on the battlefield, which we're not speaking a lot about here, but the pressure is heavy on Hamas. And the heavier the pressure is, the higher the likelihood that they will agree to a deal that will release Israeli hostages and will have them reunited with their families.
All right, let's take those in order. So if we have the statement from the families of American hostages, they're meeting with the president and the prime minister today. Let's put that up on the screen. And what they said was, he failed, Netanyahu, to present any new solutions of a new path forward. Above all, he failed to commit to the hostage deal that's now on the table, even though Israel's senior defense and intelligence officials have called on him to do so. You say?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the focus of his speech. And I think one of the journalists counted, and they counted the word deal once. Yeah. Iran was mentioned 28 or 29 times, I think, and deal was only mentioned once.
I mean, you're used to representing the government, but you can understand now that you're on the outside how someone would be disappointed in that, how these people would be.
And I feel their pain. I can only imagine what they're going through. And there's a lot of political tensions, and especially when the heads of security keep on indicating openly in the public and to the government that, yes, we are ready to make a deal, and that from a military point of view, we can make a deal and still obtain the goals that the government set forward to obtain. That puts a lot of pressure, and I hope that a little bit more military pressure on Hamas will allow them to fold enough, and then hostages will have an easier way out. But we have to remember that we're talking about, by design of Hamas, a long period of time that it'll take before hostages, if they all are released, before we get all our hostages back, it'll be more than the year term, right? We're now at month 10, so it'll take probably 2 months, according to the details that are available, for Israeli hostages actually to get home. And that's a long time in the Middle East, a long time for things to go wrong. Hopefully they won't, and hopefully we will see them back soon.
A couple of other things for you while we have you here. I'm sure you saw the protests in Washington. We'll talk about them in a moment. But I do want to play a clip from the White House today from John Kirby, who represents the President of National Security Matters. Here's what he had to say.
We want to get all the hostages home, clearly the Americans in particular. And that's why this deal is so important, Peter. And we are close. We are closer now, we believe, than we've been before.
That part I'll focus with you. Is that true, the closer now? The closest we've been, or closer than we've been, you think?
Yeah, we've been talking about the possibility of a deal for months. Weeks after the first deal was implemented in November, we've been talking about, and there have been speculations, and I've been in hundreds of interviews where that has been the question. I do feel, according to the information that I have available from the negotiation teams, from the government, from others, that there is enough pressure to push this forward now. And therefore, I am a little bit more hopeful than I've been over the last half year to see my fellow countrymen home. Sadly, yesterday, Israeli commandos raided into Gaza and were able to exfiltrate 5 bodies of Israelis that were killed, 1 civilian and 4 soldiers, which is some solace and comfort for the families to have them now, at least to be able to bury them at home.
Some faces and names to those bodies you were talking about on the screen right now, recovered by the
very beloved kindergarten teacher in Niroz, the lady to the left. She was loved and she raised generations in that tranquil kibbutz, murdered in the kindergarten on the morning of Saturday, the 7th of October. Her body dragged into Gaza and held for ransom. The bodies of 4 soldiers were killed as they were fighting and then taken into hostage, and they were hid in an underground tunnel 60 feet below ground.
A terrible thing, war, isn't it?
It is.
Final thought from you on the protests I mentioned yesterday. I don't know if you were in Washington or New York or around.
Been in New York.
You were in New York. So let's
going to D.C., yeah.
We watched it. It was out on our air yesterday. We were covering it live, and there was a flag being burned, right? There was Hamas graffiti. There was a Palestinian flag that went up when American flag coming down, all this kind of thing.
American flags being burnt.
Yes, so the flags being burned. Harris and others have condemned, everybody's condemned it pretty much. But we did have, there's a far left candidate, because as you know here, we've talked about this, we have all voices on for president. You probably know Jill Stein, who's run before. She was on this show last hour. I was talking to her about that. A quick clip, and then you can come back and talk about it. Here's what she said.
Burning is deemed free speech. I was not at that protest. I did not burn the flag. But let me say, I think it's rich to condemn flag burning, but not child burning. And I think that's what most of the protesters were there for, this incredible genocide.
I told her we have everybody on, we get all kinds of views, but now obviously your view would be different. Tell us.
Yeah, the only children that were burned were Israeli babies and children that were burned purposely by Hamas terrorists on the 7th of October. Yes, there have been Palestinian casualties, unfortunate casualties, but they are definitely not intentional. And the only organization and people that burn people alive are Hamas. For that lady to be supporting and condoning that is beyond my comprehension. I think that what we see on American streets are a lot of hatred towards Israel, but also a lot of hatred towards the US. And if my flag was burned like that, I would be very angry. And I would do stuff in order to never let it happen again. And what I haven't seen in the condemnations that have come from across the political spectrum is a firm commitment to do something about it. Not only that it's not okay, but actually to bring those people to justice who desecrated American monuments and burned the American flag. Never mind that they call for the killing of Jews and that they support a genocidal terrorist organization, but bring them to justice. And that was missing from a few key statements that I read over the last hours.
You're talking about the vice president in her statement? I
think so. And as someone who, is building up to a national leadership role, I think that's very important, that people do wrong things. A, it's not okay, but B, people should be brought to justice for desecrating American symbols and for openly supporting a terrorist organization.
Right, and she did condemn the flag burning in her statement. But as a final question, I know you don't officially represent the government anymore, but what about the relationship between Joe Biden and Israel versus Kamala Harris and Israel?
I think that the people of Israel are very grateful to the president and his team for his leadership and his support for Israel over many, many years. Even the Prime Minister said it. And especially during this war, I think thanks to him, the current situation is better than what it could have been had it not been for his immediate involvement, leadership, and personal involvement in stemming the flow and making sure that the violence didn't spread further. Right. And that is something that I think many Israelis are very, very grateful for. And we'll have to wait and see, and hopefully the same policies, the same type of leadership will be seen from the White House in the future. I, as an Israeli, have deep, deep trust in America and in American leadership, and I know that we are strong allies.
All right, Jonathan Conricus, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
It's always good. You always made yourself available during the war when you were with the government, and it's good to see you here in New York today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Formerly with the IDF. All right, let's